everyone, this is Ashley Tucker for My Favorite Things. Today I have another video for you where I mass produce cards. A few weeks ago I did the same thing with fall themed cards, and a few people commented on that video and asked if I could do the same kind of thing but with Christmas cards. So here we go. Now for the coloring on these cards, I wanted to use colors that would go well with my pattern paper. The pattern paper that I plan on using is the Colorful Christmas paper pad. So I looked at that paper and I pulled a bunch of Copic markers that I thought matched it really well. The stamps that I'm going to be using for the cards today are from the Chill Holiday stamp set. I'm going to be making 7 cards in this video, so I picked out 7 different images from that set. I stamped them onto some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock, the 110-pound version, and I stamped those with a Copic-friendly black ink. Now, of course, this is the stamp set that I chose to use, but you could use any stamp set that you want using the same technique. Also, I'm only making 7 cards, but you could definitely make more or less cards than that if you want to. If you didn't catch the video that I did a few weeks back with the fall-themed cards where I mass-produced them, I talked about in that video where you could do all of your coloring in advance whenever you feel like coloring. You just can take a stamp set that you really like a lot of the images from and stamp yourself a whole sheet for coloring and just make yourself coloring sheets for whenever you feel like coloring. Maybe you want to put on a movie in color or a TV show or listen to an audiobook and just get some coloring done, and then you can use the images later whenever you feel like making cards. Right here you can see that the 2 brown colors that I chose to color this bear with are just a little bit too far apart in tone to get a good blend. So as you can see, I'm taking the lighter of the 2 colors and I'm touching the tip of that to the tip of the darker one to get an in-between color to blend with. I do this all the time with my Copics because I just don't own a whole ton of Copics, and oftentimes I'll have 2 colors and I don't own the one that's in between them, so I will make it myself by using this technique. One thing that I realized when I was making these cards is I really like pulling my colors from a pattern paper pack. So the pattern paper that I'm using has colors that are not really typical Christmas colors. It has kind of a rainbow feel to it. And these are colors that I would not have thought to put together on my own. And I just pulled them from the paper pad and I colored with them. And I wasn't really sure about it at the start because they weren't colors that I'd necessarily pair together. But it worked really well, and I actually really liked the way that the coloring turned out in the end. So that's just a tip for if you're ever struggling picking out colors when you're coloring. Find your favorite pattern paper and try to pull some of the colors from that match your Copics or whatever coloring medium that you're using. And then you've got yourself a nice coloring palette. Once all of this coloring was done, I did take the coordinating dies and I ran them through my die cutting machine to cut them all out. And like I said, I'm going to do a very similar bunch of cards to the ones that I did when I did the fall themed cards, but I didn't want to do them exactly the same way. I wanted to give you a different kind of card that you could make when you're mass producing cards, so I'm going to change up the design a little bit. I, of course, kept the design pretty simple because you don't want a super complicated design when you're making a whole ton of cards. You want something that you could do a little bit quicker so that you can get a whole bunch done. But I do really like the way this design came out. The first thing that I needed for this design was a bunch of rectangles like this. I chose to use a stitched rectangle die so that I have that nice little detail. The dies that I used are the wonky stitched mini slimline dies, and I used the largest die from that set. I then grabbed my trimmer and I cut each of these rectangles right down the middle. Now, of course, you could use any rectangle die that you have in your stash. Just make sure that it fits nicely on the front of your card. If you don't want to use a rectangle die, you could also just use your paper trimmer to cut out the little squares. Once I had all of my square pieces cut, I'm going to add a sentiment to the bottom of each of them. This was really easy to do. I chose 2 different sentiments for these. One of them is from the same stamp set as the critters that I colored in, and the other one comes from the Itty Bitty Holiday stamp set. That Itty Bitty stamp set is an older set, and it is currently out of stock on the website I'm seeing, but if you really are interested in it, I would encourage you to go over to the page for it, hit the notify me button, and you can add your email, and then MFT will email you when it comes back into stock. All right, so as you can see here, I am preparing all of the different elements of my cards and placing them in piles. You do not see it on camera here, but off to the side, I do have all of those piles ready to go, kind of making like an assembly line for putting all of these cards together. So off to the side, I do have a little dish that has all of my colored in images in it. I also have a stack of these panels with the sentiments on them, and I already have foam tape on the back of all of them ready to go. I also already have a stack of pattern paper off to the side, all of the pattern paper that I picked out for my cards, and it is all cut down to the size that I want, which is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And I also made sure that all of those pieces have foam tape on the back already because I want a lot of dimension on this. If you're not a big fan of using foam tape, you could, of course, skip the foam tape and just use liquid adhesive or a tape runner for all of this instead. Skipping the foam tape will also make it so that you cut down on the time a little bit. You'll be able to make a little bit more cards because it does take a little bit more time to add the foam tape than it would to use a liquid adhesive or the tape runner. I like to add that extra time onto my card making for this because I just really love dimension, so I think it's worth the little bit of extra time. So the last thing that I have set off to the side for my assembly process is a stack of colored cardstock that is all cut to A2 size. The cardstock I picked out goes really well with the pattern paper that I have. So I picked out some red cardstock, some green cardstock, and some blue cardstock, and I cut it all down. And the way that I assembled all my cards is by first adhering the patterned paper to the colored cardstock and then the sentiment panel onto that. And then I used liquid adhesive to adhere the little critter onto the square with the sentiment right underneath. And then, of course, you just keep repeating that until all of the cards are put together. It was a really quick process once I had all of the elements ready to go. I then added some highlights with a white gel pen to all of my little critter images. And then, of course, I did put all of these panels onto card bases. It really helps if you already have a bunch of pre-made card bases. That makes the process even quicker. This next step is totally optional. You could be done at this point and you'd have some nice cards, but I always like to add something a little bit extra, and lately I've been obsessed with these little enamel sticker dots. So I grabbed some that matched the cards really well, and I'm adding them on both sides of my colored in images, and I think that that just really ties the whole thing together. After that, all 7 of my cards are done, and here's a look at all of them. I finished all 7 of these in about the same amount of time that it normally takes me to make one card. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope this video was really helpful and that it gave you a good idea for some of your Christmas cards. I hope you have a wonderful day today, and I'll see you next time.